Welcome back to Media Madness. My name is Thomas, and today we're reacting to the debate between Dylan Housman, my boss, and Tim Miller on the Bulwark podcast a few days ago. For those of you blissfully unaware, the Bulwark is a news website founded in 2018 as a home for the politically homeless. It's a website for never-Trumpers. All 41 of them. Now, the host of this show, Tim Miller, spent the majority of his adult life working in Republican politics and working on campaigns. He campaigned for John McCain, and most famously, in 2016, he campaigned for Jeb Bush. Go figure. Since then, he's been writing and talking for the Bulwark and appearing occasionally on MSNBC. Surprise, surprise. Now, the reason this conversation happened in the first place is because we felt their characterization of our White House correspondent, Reagan Reese's interview with Trump was unfair. They had accused us of softballing him and being sycophantic, essentially. Dylan correctly points out that Donald Trump, being the strange creature that he is, requires a little bit of flattery before you can get him to say anything interesting, which he does in that interview. And this conversation, as with any conversation with a liberal, devolves into an interrogation where Dylan, or, the right-winger in whatever circumstance, is expected to answer to every controversy that Donald Trump has ever been involved in. We're expected to play defense constantly.
Shootings and stuff are in the news this week, and one of the things, I went back and reread it this morning. I don't remember if we talked about this during the video. One of the things that jumped out at me when we were discussing it, she asked him about the mass shooting in Minnesota and the connection to, I think the word she used was gender ideology. And obviously that is now resurfaced given Charlie Kirk's assassin's roommate being trans and that being a potential motive there. One of the things, though, that she said when asking that question is she goes, there's 4 mass shootings since 2023, and 2 of those perpetrators have been transgender. That's 50%. Like you said, you're a fact-based outlet. I'm not really sure where that number comes from. There have been more than 4 mass shootings this summer. There was a guy in Montana at a bar, that guy in New York City famously at the NFL building. There's a drive-by outside a rap album launch party. There's a guy in Lexington, the trooper, that went to a church. That's all been this summer. It was not new mass shooting, but there's a guy outside the CDC that was kind of a anti-vax crank, killed the cop. To me, like that, what do you think about that?
Who gets to decide what a mass shooting is? There's various databases that track these things, and is a gang shooting where one gang shoots another, and there's 3 fatalities or 2 people get hit. Is that a mass shooting? There's no set definition. I think when people use the term mass shooting, and especially people in the mainstream media often use the term mass shooting, they're invoking a certain imagery that we all think of as Americans, of someone going to a school or going to a big event, shooting, trying to kill dozens of people. And so, when you have these people that cite these statistics that say, oh, there's a mass shooting every single day in America, maybe by certain metrics that might be true, but by the imagery that we think of when we think mass shootings, I don't think that's accurate. And so
This is an excellent point, and I wish people on the right would make it more. There are surveys I've seen that count a school shooting as like a gun being discharged within a certain perimeter, within a school zone even. We've all seen the graphics that libs shared around behind pastel backgrounds on Instagram around 2018 when gun violence was the top cultural issue, where they'd make outrageous claims that there were school shootings every other day in America. Many of these were cases like I just mentioned. A lot of them were personal gripes, and they were really, not representative of the very new historical phenomenon of people going into schools and murdering people indiscriminately. In the 1950s, when you could buy a rifle at a general store for $20 without any paperwork, we didn't see this happening. I wonder why.
Look at those types of shootings, I think there is a trend that there have been several recently, political assassinations in the case of the Kirk shooting, that can be connected to the trans ideology in some way. I wouldn't necessarily paint a massive trend out of it or say it's definitive, but it's certainly worth asking about at this point in time, I think.
Yeah, you could see how that would stokes animus towards trans people, though, to kind of juice the numbers to make it seem like half the mass shooting are trans folks. Like obviously half the mass shootings in this country aren't from trans folks. And if you're going to look at a more common trend about mass shooters, like they're mostly 20-year-old white dudes.
So are most trans people.
That's most of the mass shooters. So, to single out the trans folks and not mention that, across ideology, I'm not saying they're all 20-year-old conservative white dudes, but most of them are 20-year-old white dudes. Much higher
but
percentage than transgender.
I think this gets at a difference of how maybe the left and the right view what transgenderism is. If you think that being trans is just an immutable characteristic, like being a white guy, then your framing might make sense. If you view it as this ideological, social contagion of sorts that is taking, gender confused young people or isolated young people and pushing them down a path of trying to change their gender and do all these sorts of things, then it doesn't really make sense to lump it in as like a demographic category, like someone's skin color, in my opinion. So, I think that's just seeing that issue differently, really.
I guess my point is, I obviously reject the construct that you just laid out about social contagion, but even in that construct.
Yeah, I agree totally with Dylan here. So Tim continues going down the list of things the Trump admin has done that he doesn't like. I really feel for Dylan here, and props to Tim for hosting a civil and reasonable conversation, but he's really just so partisan and boring. It's like having a conversation with the New York Times. You know what his position on every issue is going to be before he even speaks. One of his more stupid lines in the sand is the controversy surrounding the Venezuelan boat strike a few weeks ago. The military struck a small boat off the coast of Venezuela that internal intelligence suggested was trafficking drugs into the United States. Tim and the rest of the left's contention is that the Trump admin did this for no reason and is hunting Venezuelan fishermen for sport. All right, let's watch.
All I'm saying is that you said that you felt like they had a plan or an end game, and I don't see it in either situation. What do you think about the boat bombing in the Caribbean? Do you think that's good? Do you think we should just be gadding random boats outside of Venezuela from the sky?
Do we know it's a random? I mean, the premise of that are random boats. I mean, you don't think?
Well, I mean, it's not a war. We're not in a war. I guess that's what I meant. I mean, maybe they're criminals. Maybe they're not. I guess, are you confident in the administration's telling the truth that they're drug dealers coming for the country with drugs for the country?
Why is this such an unbelievable concept to him that people traffic drugs into the United States? It happens all the time.
I think that.
Do you believe they're telling the truth about that?
I'm sure they had intelligence that indicated that these people were affiliated with a drug cartel or drug trafficking. Or
did you think the people that we sent to El Salvador to that death camp in El Salvador, to the Gulag, do you think are you confident that they were gang members, Tren de Aragua? Did you think that? Did you trust the administration on that?
Maybe not.
He's gish galloping. He's just bringing up one after the other. It's so boring. Like, dude, say something.
100% every
please.
single one, but most of them.
Oh, okay. So you do think that the administration lied, and we likely sent people that were not gang members to a foreign prison. You agree with that?
I think that the people they're arresting are people that were suspected or charged with crimes for the most part, as far as I know.
You think the gay hairdresser? Andre? You think he was a gang member? What do you think his job was in Tren de Aragua? Was he doing hair and makeup, or what do you think was his role?
I don't think the gay hairdresser.
I wish this guy would close his mouth occasionally. I'm tired of looking at his bottom set of
was
teeth.
Doing hair and makeup for Tren de Aragua. I think that if he was here, if people are here illegally, then we need to deport them.
There we go.
And,
to foreign prisons with no due process. We should send them to a prison in a third country with no due process, and the government should lie about who they were. You're okay with that?
I'm not okay with the government lying to them about who people are.
But they lie. I mean, that's a simple question. Do you think they lie?
The idea that before the Trump administration, that every single criminal case or deportation case or anything that's ever happened in the United States was all on the up and up, and every I was dotted and T.
Okay. Well, of course not. But we never sent people to a foreign prison camp before this time. Like that was.
Yeah, but I have no problem with people that have links to gangs being sent to a foreign prison.
But you just said you assume some of them didn't. You assume some of them didn't.
I'm not really interested in beat by beat refuting everything that Tim is saying here. It wouldn't be very interesting, and we've all heard the refutations a million times before. But part of the reason it's taken me so long to shoot this episode, and sorry guys upstairs, is that throughout watching this interview, I've been nagged by a question that I'm trying to figure out an answer to, which is, why did Tim Miller ever believe that the Republican Party was the best vehicle for his beliefs in the first place? Why did he spend the majority of his adult life as a Republican and not as a Democrat? His beliefs are fundamentally indistinguishable from the party line of the Democrats. why was he ever a Republican? What did he see in Jeb Bush that he didn't see in Hillary Clinton? Was it lower taxes? Was it free trade back in that era? I mean, surely there must have been some underlying animating belief that made him pledge his loyalty to the GOP in the first place. I apologize in advance for being long-winded, but I'm going to attempt an answer at this, and it starts in 1940. I would argue that since the election of 1940, the GOP has been a de facto controlled opposition party. And despite having won many elections since then, we have not seen an administration or a lawmaker do much of anything to meaningfully reverse, let alone slow or even oppose the never-ending tide of left-wing progression that we've seen. 1940 was FDR's third presidential election, and it was between Roosevelt and a guy named Wendell Willkie, who was a lifelong Democrat until 1939. In 1939, he switched from Democrat to Republican, the official public reason being because he had some gripes with the New Deal. And so he runs against Roosevelt. I don't know. I just suspect that there was maybe something more going on here, because he didn't oppose Roosevelt on the only issue that really mattered at the time, which was the question of foreign intervention into the conflict that would eventually become World War II. There were a lot of questions about whether to send money to Britain as they were being attacked by the Germans, and whether to start gearing up for war. Now, Willkie was a pro-intervention Democrat turned Republican. Interestingly, after Roosevelt wins the election, Willkie joins the administration. He becomes Roosevelt's special envoy on diplomatic trips and things like that. And from then on until Trump, I would say that we really haven't had a serious opposition party in this country. And I would say the case for Trump isn't just about the border and about kitchen table type issues. It's about giving the American people an actual opposition party back, because we see every Republican administration is just so weak-willed and tepid in comparison to the ones of before 1940. Eisenhower consolidated the changes made during the New Deal. Nixon, I have a soft spot for Nixon, but he expanded the regulatory structure. He created the EPA. Reagan was pitched to us as a right-wing revolution, but he did nothing at all to advance the right-wing cause. The welfare state and Social Security kept ballooning. He granted universal amnesty to all the illegal immigrants in the country at the time. We got further and probably the strictest ever gun control laws under Reagan. I'm still not totally sure what the difference between the Bushes and the Clintons actually is. I'm sure a lot of you watching now probably romanticize some of those Republican presidents that I've mentioned, but really truly ask yourself, has the long arc of the era that we're living in, this Pax Americana, has the advancement of leftism and progressivism been perturbed at all by winning any election until Donald Trump? It hasn't. And I think this is the reason that someone like Tim Miller ever felt comfortable calling himself a Republican at all, because it doesn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything until Trump, honestly. So I have a little bit more to say about that. I'm sorry for the lecture, but let's get into why Tim Miller thinks that Donald Trump won.
Investing in this crypto.
Yeah, not great. Not a fan.
Yeah, not a fan of that either. So what have you been a fan of, I guess? What do you think he's really knocking out of the park?
See, here's the tenor of this conversation. We've been picking on specific instances where things have been executed poorly, or
unprecedented corruption and lying about mass deportations,
starting
failed
with
foreign
deportations. Yeah, again, failed foreign policy we just disagree on, I guess.
Okay.
But the Trump administration, the reason I think Trump won is because he actually was focused on kitchen table issues people cared about. People wanted the border to be secured. People wanted inflation to come down and the economy to improve. People wanted to this is not a kitchen table issue, admittedly, but people were culturally, I think, fed up with a lot of the DEI and left-wing, cultural ideology that was going on.
Yeah.
And he's come into office and he's addressed many of those things. And so I think if you look at the border being secure, we had an entire discourse for weeks about how we needed to pass new laws and we needed to do all these various things to secure the border and stop the flow of illegal immigration. And Trump came into office and it basically instantly stopped, just based on executive actions and what he was doing in his rhetoric alone, actually. So I think if you look at the issues that animated people in the previous election, many of them have been addressed. The border's been secure. We just got a great GDP report. We've got DEI being purged out of the federal government. So some of the things that were run on are being executed on successfully. I don't think that's like a
I want to pick
controversial
on two of those
statement.
things. We're kind of running out of time. I like you agree.
I like how as soon as Dylan starts talking about issues that Tim knows he can't win on, he's all of a sudden he's running out of time. I also don't know what that means in a podcast format. What do you mean you're running out of time? This video could be 18 hours long if you want.
You disagree with me on foreign policy. I agree to disagree with you on the border. We can maybe have a separate conversation about the border someday.
Hold on. What would you disagree with on the border?
I don't think it's good. I don't think you want to live in a country that has net negative migration. I think it's against the American tradition. And I also
we just got new polling. We just got new polling today that Americans still overwhelmingly trust Republicans more than Democrats on the immigration issue.
That's okay.
So I think that suggests that. Okay, that's fair. I just think.
Yeah, okay. So Tim, I don't think knows his history. It's against the American tradition to have a net negative migration. Why does Tim think we have the term waves of immigration, especially when we're talking about the 19th century and migration then? The reason we use this term is because in the 19th century, immigration policy was kind of a swinging pendulum. We had 20 years of nativism, and then we had 20 years where we were accepting a bunch of migrants. And this helped, kind of ease civic tensions. It allowed for assimilation. It allowed for, not the job market not getting overrun with cheap labor, which did happen in the 19th century, but not nearly to the extent it's happening today. The America that Tim is talking about is the America that was founded in 1945, and specifically with the Hart-Celler Act in 1965, we have had a never-ending, constantly ballooning and accumulating wave of immigration. It's a single tsunami that has not ebbed even once since that law was passed. So Tim is just wrong here. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I don't think it's
I'm frankly, I'm not interested in what his vision for what the essence of the American way is.
I don't think you want to live in a country that has net negative migration. I think Americans will probably change their mind about that if that happens for like 8.
Immigration is pretty much universally unpopular in almost every country where they do polls on this. So I mean, it's just you're out of luck, man.
Like the countries that have net negative migration are like Syria, Cameroon, Venezuela. You want to be a growing country.
All those countries have an influx of millions and millions of people just flowing into their country. I mean, I feel like context is important.
Yeah.
Now, to tie off the historical point I was making before, I'm going to skip to the end of the interview where they start discussing the shuttering of USAID. And I find that to be the most interesting thing that the second Trump admin has done so far. And yeah, let's see what Tim's approach to the issue
eliminating is. USAID which is such a small number, like cutting the budget for like the most vulnerable people in the world. Doesn't that give you a little bit of pause, like given the other kind of costs that the administration is, the things that we are prioritizing our spending money on?
I'll tell you what I think about USAID. The idea that there are things at USAID that were good. I think we should be funding things like PEPFAR and programs that help vulnerable people and protect them. And some of these programs have been retained or are being considered being retained. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that USAID did that had nothing to do with that had to do with spreading ideology, that had to do with
but then why shutter
destabilizing foreign governments. Because if you shutter it and then keep the good things,
the good things aren't coming back. You know they're not. You think this administration is going to start giving plumpy nut to poor babies in Africa?
I think Marco Rubio is obviously a Christian, and I think he's a smart guy. And I don't agree with you that I would assume that none of the good things are going to come back if Marco Rubio is in charge of it.
So you would support that? You would support bringing back food aid for African children? You would support that?
Yeah, I think having American soft power around the world is important.
Yeah, so this is a good point. So Dylan's going to talk about soft power, and I think he's doing Tim's job for him a little bit here, because there's a smart way and a dumb way for a liberal to confront a conservative about the USAID thing. Tim is taking the dumb way. He's kind of doing this whole bleeding heart thing, doing this appeal to morality and, what you think of the children. I have some liberal friends who approached it in the smart way, where they talk about American dominion over the world and soft power and what this will mean for our influence in certain regions, especially Africa, which China is trying to take over. Dylan is, of course, right about USAID funding all kinds of stupid, woke-type nonsense, especially throughout the later Obama years and especially during the Biden years. But Tim actually touches on something really interesting here. He says, well, why don't you just take out the bad stuff? Like, why do you have to shutter the entire agency to remove the bad programs? Trump and the Doge team basically took one of the more prestigious and influential and active organizations in the federal government, took it out back and shot it. I think the USAID thing asserts more than anything Trump has ever done that he is not controlled by this monoparty that I was talking about earlier, that Trump actually is in control of the federal government. I think if the past 5 years has taught us anything, it's that the presidency before Trump 2 was a largely ceremonial role, and you really don't even need a sentient person in the Oval Office for things to run, albeit not well. The government really can operate on autopilot, and I would argue that it has been for the past 80 years for the reasons I mentioned before. It really does seem like no matter who wins an election, we have been on a railroad track, essentially, along the same trajectory for so many decades now. I think the case for Donald Trump is more than just about dinner table issues or the border or DEI or woke or any of those other things. The case for him, and you know, listen, he has a lot of problems and he's imperfect and has a lot of controversies, the crypto thing being chief among them for me. He has a lot of problems, but I think he does represent in a very real way a reassertion of the Americans' right to oppose, to have an opposition party, to have an actual say in the way our government is run. So I've done enough talking today. I think Dylan did a great job in this interview. I encourage more of these sort of bilateral conversations. I think they make for interesting content and they're often productive. Thank you for watching Media Madness. You must like, comment, and subscribe below, or Jeb Bush will be president in 2028, as Tim here wishes. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.